Hey guys, happy Sunday. Sifu Adalik here, Red Sash Renegade, and I wanted to share with you some thoughts on Black Sash Perseverance. I actually had a client ask me about that, I think recently on one of my other lives, and it was kind of a separate topic, so I didn't want to address it right there. But Black Sash Perseverance, or just, perseverance, what we mean by that is, especially over the past couple of years, we've had a lot of adversity we have to go through. How do you keep persistent in your goals when it seems like the deck is, kind of stacked against you? Right? Well, that happens throughout life. Sometimes you're going to have things where, we're uphill, and then things are definitely seem stacked against us, and other times when things are easy and we're getting some momentum and we're coasting, right? And the reality is sometimes we're up, down. Life is just that series, and running a business, starting a practice, being self-employed is even more so filled with those ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. So the first step of keeping having a lot of perseverance, even despite when things are difficult, is realizing that over a long enough time, there's ups and downs, but eventually you're moving your way up, right? As long as you keep focused on your goal. So I think when it comes to perseverance, the problem is that especially as entrepreneurs and business owners, which is kind of mostly your self-employed people who I made this video for. So if you're not one of those, this might not be of interest to you. So don't be afraid to tune this out if that doesn't apply to you. But if it does apply to you, then definitely keep watching, right? We have, as entrepreneurs and business people, self-employed people, we have a lot of what we call shiny object syndrome, right? Where something new and exciting comes up, some new method of doing something, some new method of maybe doing the technical side of our job, whatever it is, or some new method of promoting our business. We're always kind of jumping from one shiny object to the next. And a lot of times, even though it seems exciting or it seems productive at the time, it's just another shiny object to jump at, and it redirects us from something productive that we should be doing, right? And one way to kind of fight against that is the one key element that separates people that are achieving something long-term and that are genuinely satisfied with their life because they have a lot of fulfillment because they're accomplished something. They're learning new things all the time. They're constant, never-ending learners. They're achieving something. They're always enriching their lives because they're learning new things and they're adding to it, right? And that's kind of how it depends on how you define success, but that's kind of how I would define it, that you're a lifelong learner and you're in a state of constant, never-ending improvement, and you're always cultivating some part of yourself, right? And your knowledge and your wisdom. The one constant element that separates people that do that from those who don't is time perspective, okay? Time perspective is how you, what you're looking toward and how much time you're actually conceiving, right? Like how much time you're looking ahead. Typically, the more people that have a longer time perspective are going to accomplish a lot more because they're focused on one thing for a longer period of time. And because of that, they're more likely to weather those storms and those up and down periods that you go through in life, okay? Whereas someone who doesn't have that long time perspective, they're not going to be able to, weather all those storms they're going to go through on the road of accomplishing those goals. So the more you can stretch out your time perspective, the less likely you're going to be redirected all the time by those shiny objects that come in, okay? So let me give you an example, okay? So you got to think of this as like a spectrum, as a scale, okay? On the one end of this spectrum of time perspective, you've got someone who invests in something very, very long term, okay? So like say someone who invests in real estate with the goal of over 25 years paying that off, okay? Now, over a 25-year time frame, there's going to be a lot of times when that mortgage is very difficult to pay and many times when it's easier to pay, okay? But they keep consistently paying it no matter what because they have that time perspective that one day I'm going to own this piece of real estate free and clear, okay? That requires a long time perspective, okay? But someone who doesn't do that, someone who only rents every month, they're only thinking of a 30-day time perspective, meaning at the end of that 30 days, I've got to pay that rent again. So their time perspective is relatively short, okay? Well, relative to that 25-year amortization period. So at the end of that 25 years, one person's going to have something achieve more significant than the other person, right? I'm not saying that that's bad to keep renting if your value is somewhere else, But because you had that long time perspective, you'll have a different, you'll have something in place to show that than you otherwise would if you didn't have that long time perspective. Okay, most people, normal people, have a 2-week time perspective. All right, that's not an accident. Okay, that's a trained behavior. Most people have and this might be offensive for some people, but I asked you, if you're still watching, I asked you to tune out earlier on in case of like in danger of offending some people. So I'm hoping you're not watching at this point if this would offend you. All right, I tried to kind of sort everyone out early on. If you have a 2-week time perspective, that's normal because that's the regular pay cycle for most people. So when you're used to getting paid every 2 weeks at a time, you are conditioned for that kind of behavior. All right, that's not a bad thing. We're all conditioned for behavior. Those are external factors that condition us. The same with TV, for example. Okay, we know this. Like if you're a speaker and you're trained in public speaking, you know, or you would have heard at some point, that the average topic will get people for about 7 minutes. Okay, most people have a 7-minute attention span where they can kind of follow a narrative for 7 minutes, and then you have to transition to something else, or you have to tell a joke, or you've got to kind of break that 7-minute segment. The reason for that is because television, on average, is 7 minutes to one thing to the next, for 7 minutes to a commercial, right? So over the decades of television, people have been trained and their behavior has been conditioned for that 7-minute interval, and they have to go up and get a drink or do something else or whatever, right? They're programmed for that. So, I mean, you can scream about that, but as a speaker, you could consider it, take it into consideration, and then make sure your speeches follow that pattern so people are comfortable with it because that's what they're used to. That's conditioned behavior, which is why I'm very vocally against TikTok. I think it's one of the stupidest platforms out there because it's training people literally to think in 30-second intervals, right? So maybe I sound like an old man, like, that's going to rot your brain, kids. Well, I just call it as I see it. It's constantly training you to only be looking at something for 30 seconds and then want another dopamine hit from watching another thing for 30 seconds, right? It's training that behavior. But there's a lot of things like that. But anyway, the point is, 2 weeks, that's the normal thing. And if you're only thinking 2 weeks at a time, paycheck to paycheck, and you're programmed for that, it's less likely you're going to have a long-term success. And that's why we teach with our kids' programs, with our black belt, we try to get kids to focus on earning their black belt, their junior black belt, because we're going to stretch their time perspective out 3 years or 5 years. And we know that if we can get them at a young age to focus long-term and sacrifice little inconveniences like having to go to Kung Fu instead of playing at the park that day, we get them in the habit of, learning how to delay gratification in order for a long-term goal, okay? So if we get them doing that younger, we're going to have a much greater chance of success for them in their education ongoing long-term, right? So we have to be just cognizant of that, of how our behavior is shifted based on those, the different time frames. But having a long-term perspective, so having long-term goals, is definitely going to help you overcome that shiny objects syndrome, right? You don't want to set goals that are only 1 year. And I think this is Tony Robbins that said, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and they underestimate what they can do in 3. Because typically what we do is we set a new goal for ourselves in January. New me, new year, new me, right? And then we only set it for that year. And then it kind of putters out, right? And then we kick ourselves and we try to do it again the next year. And then same kind of thing. We might get there a few months and then we drop it, we regret it, and then we try it again in the new January, new me, Instead of just setting a 3-year goal and sticking to it long term, realizing there's going to be ups and downs along the way, right? We reset instead. Whereas if we kept one long goal for 3 years, we're probably going to accomplish a lot more over that 3-year cycle. If we set a goal that's 5 years or 10 years, if we can keep focused on that goal, we're going to accomplish a lot more, and we're less likely to jump from one shiny object to the next. So if you want to know first how to really, get that black sash persistence and keep focused and not be jumping from one thing to the next, or not getting too upset and too downtrodden when there's a downtime, long-term goals will help with that. So ask yourself, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? Right? And you can dream big. If you got 10 years to do something, you can accomplish a lot if you keep focused on it. Right? Where do you want to be in 10 years? Ask yourself that. Write it down. What does it look like? Where am I going to live? Right? What's my family going to look like? you know, how much would you like to earn in 10 years? And then once you've got that set, then you can kind of gradually work your way backwards and, you know, put in little checkpoints here and there maybe every year, every 3 year, every month, whatever. You can work your way back. But you've got to start with that big visualization, and you've got to keep it in mind. And it will help you weather the storms that are going to come through, like they just did. I hope that's helpful. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to put them in the comments section. And if you have any other questions about anything else that you'd like, you know, an opinion on, my renegade opinion on, then feel free to put them in the comment section. Okay, share this with anyone, and I'll also put the link in somewhere for the Red Sash Renegade website. So if you'd like to get a couple good courses I put together for goal setting and for morning meditation, they're there. And if you want to get a private strategy session on how to apply this for your specific you know, life or business, then feel free to go to that website and you can secure a spot for yourself there as well. Okay, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.